We will read responsively Psalm 136. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for God is good. God wipes away the tears of sorrow and brings mourning into joyous hope. O God, bring refugees of today out of persecution into safety. While protecting those who languish in refugee camps. With strong hands and outstretched arms, protect the families that have been forced to flee their home. Grant them safety and protection as they pass through the troubled waters. Give comfort and solace to the children who have been torn from their parents' arms. For those who have walked for days on end without food or water, give them sustenance and your mercy. And guide and lead us on our journey that we might serve one another with encouraging love. And that we might walk together to build communities of hope where strangers become neighbors and the outcasts become friends. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Amen.
The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 10. The parable of the Good Samaritan. Just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? He said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. I invite my children and friends to come up for a children's message. Come up front, kids. They are our neighbors and something more. As followers of Jesus, we cannot walk by the other side of the road without showing mercy. The parable we just told to the kids, Jesus shared with a gentleman trying to get by as little as he could in his spiritual life. And Jesus told him the story about where many people walk by the other side, and it's this unlikely person that stopped to give him care and gave him all the care that and made provisions for him and said, if he needs anything else, I will come and take care of him. You see, some people were just too busy. And some may have had their own religious reasons why they couldn't stop their being, because if they get their hands bloody, they wouldn't be able to worship with the others in the synagogue. You see, they didn't want to come too close to suffering. And I'm wondering if this man was forcing them to ask if maybe he was really a threat to their own personal life. Too busy? Afraid to be looked down upon by other people and threatened in their own personal comforts of life? Excuses for not giving care? And then the Samaritan, who was the least likely to do the caring, is the one who did everything that Jesus suggested we all should do. What did this man do? He did nothing but to stop and picked up this wounded person, this discarded human being that others had just sort of hoping that he would just go away. And this man, the Samaritan, got all bloody and dirty as he placed him on his donkey and brought him to the place for giving care. Yes, that's the picture of mercy that Jesus gives to us. And on this day, we are echoing the words of Jesus that we cannot silence when he says to the people of his day and ours, "Go and do likewise." So who are they? Who are the ones along the side of the road that have been beat up and stripped of life and left for dead, and as if to say it's up to you to find a new beginning? There may be other people, but today we are thinking of the refugees. People because of war and ethnic cleansing and the threat of death. It's been estimated that every day 34,000 men, women, and children are displaced by their homes because of this kind of violence, forced to leave everything that they call their own life in our day alongside the roadside of life. As we travel, there are an estimated 22 million people living in other countries than the one that they would want to live in, called their own home. There are two questions we need to be asking ourselves this morning, and we're asking these questions because we're followers of Jesus, who invites us to stop and give care to the people in need. The first is, what potential excuse can we give with a clear conscience and walk by on the other side without giving our neighbors care? The second question, what does it mean as followers of Jesus to show mercy to our wounded neighbors called refugees? That's what we're looking at this morning. Listen to a touching story told by two people, a little young child by the name of Ahmed from Syria, and another gentleman, Harry, who was also a refugee from the Holocaust, but telling a similar story.
It was a happy childhood, but I could feel what was happening around me. One morning I woke up, the shops had been ransacked, all the windows were smashed, and my school had been burned.
الصوت كان كتير عالي، كل البيت كان عم يهز، كان كتير قريب الصوت، الناس كانت عم تصرخ وتركض، فكتير عالم انقتلت وماتت.
My mother said I had to go. I didn't want to leave her. But she said we would meet again soon. She must have known that she would never see me again.
كان قرار إنه موت ولا عيش. أنا وأخوي هربنا لحالنا، نمنا بالشارع، بالبساتين، بالحدائق، وين ما يصح لنا.
They brought us to a refugee camp. We had hardly any food.
الرجال كانوا حاطيننا بقارب صغير، كان لشخصين أو ثلاثة، بس نحن كنا 12. بأي لحظة كان ممكن يقلب.
Planes flew over us and gunned our boat. I dived and hid under a raft.
كان كتير عتن، ما قدرت لاقي أخوي. بلش صرخ بشار بشار.
I've never been more scared in my whole life. I thought I was going to die.
قضينا 10 أيام بالمي.
I thought about my family the whole time.
أكتر شي اشتقت له هو أمي.
We were waiting to know our fate. Well, thankfully, they let us in.
كنا كتير مبسوطين لما وصلنا آخر شي.
I'm alive.
أنا عايش، أنا
I
واحد
am
من
one of the
المحظوظين.
lucky ones.
Different cultures, different generations, but the horrific reality is the same. The cry of the refugee in our world today is painfully heard in far too many places. In Syria alone, it's estimated that 4.9 million people are living away from their war-torn country, not because they want to, but because this horrible war is forcing them as displaced persons to find someplace safe to live. That means 6 out of every 10 Syrians have been displaced by their home and family. The truly hard part of the statistic, folks, that I have a hard time getting out of my mind is that half of these refugees in Syria are under the age of 18, like little Ahmad. You see, this morning we cannot avoid it because we hear the scriptures say very clearly that we as God's people are called to care for the refugee, the stranger, and the foreigner. In the Old Testament book of Leviticus, we hear, when a foreigner resides among you, do not mistreat them. The foreigner must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, and for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. If we are left to our own devices, and if we did not hear Jesus say that our calling is to reach out with care to the people in need, especially the refugees, it would be so easy to walk by the other side. It'd be so easy to say, I have so many reasons to care for me and my own family, and I don't know how to give care to you as well. You see, but the gospel of Jesus Christ is so countercultural. It changes us in ways in which we think and we act that we would never do it alone without the gospel. You see, Jesus is inviting us this morning to hear that word of compassion that he says, I have come and I picked you up out of the roadside of life, wherever that may be, and given you brand new life. And now I invite you to do the same. Yes, to welcome the stranger, all right. To find that person that is forced to leave everything behind can be met with paralyzing fear, but the gospel overcomes fear. The compassion we know in Jesus is the one that changes our thinking about those who are refugees, because Jesus was not afraid to get involved in our lives, and even though there might be areas of our life that aren't good, he says, I come to love you and care for you just as you are. And it's that radical compassion that turns our fears into a radical acceptance of a new calling. You see, this Jesus unlocks our clenched fists, the ways in which that we cling to things that we think that are mine and my family's and ours alone. And Jesus has a way of opening them up so that they can be extended hands to care for the refugee in need. Go and do likewise. That's our calling today. If there's one lesson that I would wish for every child in our Sunday school and confirmation program to learn, is that Jesus has something special for them to do for the care of those in special need called refugees. Because these refugees are just like you and me. They're longing for some new beginnings where they might live in peace, where they might live without some threat of violence, and where they might have enough food in their homes. And parents pray that they would have enough food to give to their children so they wouldn't have to hear them go to bed hungry. You see, refugees are more like us than we ever want to think. Bushra tells her story with gratitude.
My life in Iraq like a nightmare. I suffer a lot. If we stay in Iraq, all my kids get kidnapping or killing. I left Iraq 2006 and we flew to Syria. In Syria, they told me they accept us to go as a refugee. I arrived in the United States in 2008. The IRC received us from the airport, from the first moment. I found the apartment full of furniture, food, whatever I need. The IRC gave me ESL, start to improve my English. And they work with us how to make a resume and find a job. I got 2 jobs. One of them, I am working in the IRC, calling the donor, thank them, express my gratitude to them. My name is Bushra, a refugee. Many donors, they send me back a letter and they say, Bushra, you are a brave woman, you did a great job, you and your family. The IRC also offered to me courses for the citizen, and I am so happy with this because now I am American and serve and work in my country. My dream is fulfilled. Everything. I dream to get a job, my kids to start studying, get a degree, to settle and buy a house. So my dream come true.
Yes, the refugee is more like us than we might want to think. Living out our faith in Jesus, we see the refugee in a brand new light. When Jesus said, For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat, and I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you visited me. And Jesus said to those that would hear him, as you do it to the least of these, you are doing it to me. Friends, when we look into the eyes of the refugee, we can see Jesus there. And as we see Jesus there, our abilities to reach out and care becomes greater than ever before. Because when we see Jesus in the plight of refugees trapped in a refugee camp, we willingly assume a new challenge. We ask new questions. We take on bold and costly ventures that may even cost us something. We reach out with a voice of hope that goes far beyond words. To see Jesus in the eyes of the refugee is to be liberated, to take new risks. As you leave worship today, on the table in the rotunda, there are copies of stories like we've heard in these 2 episodes today. Read them, bring them multiples home. And in the back, there are some discussion items as well as action items that you might choose to be a part of. And also on that table, there's an opportunity to people to sign up to join the others of the refugee team. I wonder where God is going to lead this congregation in caring for the refugee in need. I've shared with you how my brother Bob and his wife Shirley accepted a refugee family into their home nearing the end of the Vietnam War. Shirley was spending hours with the Ta, teaching him English and his father in their kitchen. And she did other things that helped them find that new beginning. And when my sister-in-law Shirley died, there at the funeral was Ta, his father and his mother who had since joined them, and also Ta's wife and his newly born child. They didn't sit in the front rows of that funeral at Christ and Prince of Peace in Burnsville. They didn't sit in the front rows as refugees, however. They sat there as members of the Nordine family. How many others are there in refugee camps who are robbed of life and separated from loved ones, and yes, in many respects are just like the one in the Good Samaritan story that is longing for someone to reach out with care? Friends, as followers of Jesus, it doesn't make any difference if we are Republican or Democrat, independent, or any color in between. We cannot remain silent. We cannot. We cannot walk by the other side of the road and not hear their cry for help And Jesus says, I have a calling for each of you. Why? Because Jesus says these people in need are your neighbors. And as Todd taught me, they're more than neighbors. They're members of our family. Jesus, open our eyes to the cry of the refugee calling for help. Jesus, open our hearts to the call to love the stranger as you have loved us.